Hello, everyone, and welcome. Here are some of the stories we have for you right now. No laughing matter. The Prime Minister warns Donald Trump isn't joking about annexing Canada.
We need to both start thinking tactically and strategically.
The closed-door remarks about what resource the U.S. president is really after.
If it changes to focus on Donald Trump in the next federal election, could be a bit of a game changer.
A new snapshot of who Canadians would pick to negotiate with the Oval Office.
Just sharing this with Canada and the world is going to be a great experience.
Soldiering on through sport, the final countdown to the start of the Invictus Games.
A polite way of going up and showing my patriotism.
And taking to the skies to outline the importance of Canadian pride.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Donald Trump is not joking when he says he wants to annex Canada. Those words coming from none other than the Prime Minister himself, according to sources. Justin Trudeau made the remark at a closed-door trade summit of Canadian business and labour leaders in Toronto. CTV's Judy Trin was at the summit and has more on what was discussed and the urgency behind it, Judy.
Heather, the Prime Minister was clear. Donald Trump wants to turn Canada into the 51st state, and he's coming after our energy. 200 of Canada's top CEOs and labor leaders, from the auto sector to agriculture to tech, preparing for an economic war, brainstorming how to stop Donald Trump's weaponization of tariffs.
We are in a moment that we have to meet for Canadians.
The Prime Minister was more urgent after the media left the room. Sources say he told participants there's no doubt that Trump wants to turn Canada into the 51st state and that he wants our energy.
What Donald Trump has awakened us all to is one person can change the course of everybody else's prosperity here.
Trudeau told the audience Trump had a 4-page list of grievances, that he wants Canada's critical minerals to further his protectionist goals. This American lobbyist says that may give Canada some advantage.
I absolutely think energy security has been abundantly clear that that's a priority for the Trump administration. I think critical minerals are a huge part of that. Canada is much further along in developing their resources and have more resources than the United States, so it is a point of leverage.
Discussion focused on 3 areas. First, fighting off the 25% tariff threats. Then eliminating interprovincial trade barriers and loosening some federal regulations in the next 30 days. Finally, supercharging development. Among the discussions, building east-west pipelines to move oil and natural gas and using more nuclear energy.
We will continue to fight for the sovereignty of our country while strengthening Team Canada right here at home. We are ready for any eventuality that comes our way from a Canada-U.S. perspective.
There was also a lot of discussion about expanding trade beyond the U.S. Canada has free trade agreements with 2/3 of the global community, but companies have relied a lot on the U.S. instead of reaching out. That won't happen anymore. Heather.
Judy, thank you for this. Canada's economy did fare better than expected in December. New numbers out from StatsCan show the unemployment rate dipped slightly to 6.7%. But with U.S. tariffs still on the horizon, many businesses are already bracing for impact. CTV's John Benavalli-Rao now on how some are preparing to shift operations. John.
Heather, we're at O'Lee Fine Linens. This is a Toronto-based company that makes, among other things, bedding and loungewear. And it's one of the thousands of Canadian businesses that would be affected by a Trump tariff, including something that isn't as well known, the loss of the de minimis exemption. Small businesses like this are currently able to ship items less than $800 to the U.S. without paying any duties. But Trump's executive order for tariffs would also scrap that exemption. So everything, whether it's $200 bed sheets or $100 pajamas, would have duty attached to it. It would be a major headache paperwork-wise for businesses and an added expense.
Our American online consumers really take advantage of it. They benefit from that $800 exemption. I think once that's gone, if it goes, that would likely be the end of our American business online.
Joanna Goodman, who's the CEO of this linen business, says they are in better shape than others because most of their business is in Canada. Just 10% is American customers, but the tariff and exemption loss would still hurt. Another small Canadian business that makes shoelaces has already decided to pause shipments to the U.S., and the Canadian Federation of Business is concerned about what lies ahead.
We don't really know what's going to happen, and that's the scary part of this all.
All of this as there was some positive news on the economy front. Statistics Canada reports 76,000 new jobs last month, nearly half in manufacturing. But economists say uncertainty about the Trump tariff may cause some businesses to pull back on hiring, at least in the weeks ahead. Heather.
Some turbulent economic times ahead. John, thank you. A new survey from Nanos Research for CTV News shows Mark Carney is the top pick to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump over Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and his fellow Liberal leadership candidates. CTV's Jeremy Sharon has more on what the survey shows. Break this down for us, Jeremy.
Heather, it's a snapshot of how Canadians feel about the biggest issue facing this country right now. And the data clearly shows who they think is best to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump. The survey shows 2 in 5 Canadians, or 40%, feel former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney would do the best job negotiating with Trump. 26% feel Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre would be better, while 13% favored Liberal leadership candidate Chrystia Freeland and just 1% Karina Gould. Now, it's important to note this is how Canadians feel about this specific issue. Most election polls still indicate the Conservatives have a significant lead over the Liberals when it comes to voter intention. The question now, will Trump become the ballot box issue for the next general election?
What the numbers tell us is that the ballot question, if it changes to focus on Donald Trump in the next federal election, could be a bit of a game changer for the competition between the Conservatives and the Liberals.
The survey also found Canadians are increasingly supportive of immediate retaliation to U.S. tariffs, and they support a wide range of measures, having provinces pull U.S. wine, beer, and liquor from stores across the country, imposing dollar-for-dollar counter tariffs on U.S. goods, and cutting off exports of oil, natural gas, and electricity to the U.S. The survey also indicated there is widespread support for increased defense spending immediately to reach NATO's 2% of GDP target. Heather?
CTV's Jeremy Sharon in Ottawa. Donald Trump is suggesting tariffs could soon be on the way for more countries.
I'll be announcing that next week, reciprocal trade, so that we're treated evenly with other countries. We don't want any more or any less.
Trump made the comments as he welcomed Japan's prime minister to the White House today. He said tariffs are on the table for Japan if they can't reduce the roughly $100 billion trade deficit with the U.S. Trump also said he will probably be speaking with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russia's Vladimir Putin next week. The president also held a joint press conference with the Japanese prime minister. He answered questions from reporters on a range of topics. For more, let's bring in CTV's political analyst, Eric Ham. Eric, let's begin with Japan. You were listening in. What did you make of what you heard from the president?
You know, it's very striking because what we're seeing here is Donald Trump is coming across as very accessible and willing to engage with global leaders. But again, what we're continuing to see from him at home, particularly when you look at organizations like the U.S. Agency for International Development, the nation's premier development organization, Donald Trump has completely shuttered that. And so we're getting 2 different narratives, Donald Trump being the master global diplomat, but at the same time making clear that his MAGA approach is still an expansionist yet restrictive American policy.
Eric, let's expand on that a little bit with this U.S. aid and Trump's plans to slash the government's foreign agency. What ramifications could they have on the global stage?
Oh, this is huge because what we are seeing is the organization is already shuttered. In fact, now you've got thousands of employees who have been told to return back to Washington. But at the same time, we heard from Donald Trump this week, and he continues to double down on this notion that the United States will actually take over Gaza. And the agency, if that were to happen, that would actually lead that development would be the U.S. Agency for International Development. But what we're seeing right now is that agency, quite frankly, is no longer in service or operational. And the question becomes, who actually takes the lead on that when you don't have the nation's premier agency who would normally do it in effect?
All right, Eric Ham, as always, thank you for your insight. Israel's prime minister is praising Trump for issuing sanctions against members of the International Criminal Court. Trump's order cited the court's arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu for alleged war crimes in Gaza.
He issued yesterday these sanctions on this scandalous and corrupt organization, the ICC, that threatens the right of all democracies to defend themselves by themselves.
The ICC condemned the U.S. sanctions on its staff and called on its 125 member states, which includes Canada, for support. The sound of air raid sirens was heard overnight in Kyiv, along with gunfire, as Ukraine's military says it shot down 81 Russian drones, while another 30 disappeared from radar without reaching their targets. No damages were reported. The shocking aftermath of a crash in Brazil where a small plane hit a bus on a busy street in Sao Paulo. The two people in the plane were killed, while a woman on a bus was taken to hospital along with a person on a motorcycle who was hit by debris. And a flight tracker shows the last known whereabouts of a plane in Alaska that has gone missing with 10 people on board. A search is underway. Vancouver is buzzing with excitement as it prepares to host the Invictus Games, the international sporting event for wounded and injured soldiers. The opening ceremony kicks off tomorrow and will be the largest ever for the Games. CTV's Kathy Lee is outside BC Place in Vancouver with more now on how the city is preparing. Kathy.
Heather, the opening ceremony was moved from the Vancouver Convention Centre to BC Place to allow for more capacity, 20-fold more actually. Katy Perry and Coldplay's Chris Martin will headline a 2-hour spectacle tomorrow, which includes 800 performers. As for the games itself, there will be hundreds of competitors from more than 24 countries.
Now we're going to have 40,000 people from the community there cheering on these competitors. I think it's, at first I was cautiously optimistic, and then I saw the momentum build, and then now we're thrilled.
Parts of downtown are draped in yellow and black, the event's colors. There are I am signs in several locations meant to encourage people to think about what they are. I am strong. I am courageous.
I am really captures the spirit of the games. It comes from the poem Invictus.
And about 1,900 volunteers from 18 different countries are here to help out the athletes.
Serving members and veterans, they sacrifice a lot for the world, so it's a great opportunity to cheer them up.
The Invictus Village at the Vancouver Convention Centre will have interactive exhibits, meet and greets with competitors, and medal celebration. All of that is free for the public. Heather.
Certainly lots to take in. Kathy, thank you. The Invictus Games are an opportunity for veterans and those still serving to thrive despite mental and physical wounds of war. CTV's Andrew Johnson now with some of their stories as the energy and excitement ramps up. Andrew.
Heather, you can really feel the energy downtown with more than 500 athletes from 25 countries here in Vancouver, many competing in multiple competitions this week. But the Invictus Games are about far more than hitting the podium. On a rare sub-zero day in Vancouver's Stanley Park, another unusual sight, a group of New Zealanders enjoying a snowball fight.
Yellow snow!
It's the kickoff to a week in Canada these Kiwis have been waiting for.
It feels amazing, unreal. I can't believe that this is something that's put together for us.
Us, in this case, men and women who have served their countries and gotten hurt in the process. Ed Dorright's struggle began when he took 3 machine gun rounds in the leg during a training exercise. The prognosis? Amputation. But Ed wasn't having it.
I was basically stubborn and said, look, I've got movement in here. I want to save it.
Doctors saved his leg, but his injuries weren't just physical.
The mental journey was tough. If you're brutally honest, it was tough. I went through, I saw 4 psychologists before I actually connected with the one that resonated with me.
It's a struggle Canadian Forces medical technician Cheryl Belanger is also familiar with, diagnosed with PTSD after what she experienced in Afghanistan and Haiti.
I struggle with anxiety and depression. So a lot of times it's worrying about the future and dwelling on the past.
For Belanger, Invictus is a safe space to open up.
Essentially, you're allowed to let your guard down.
It wasn't until Canadian co-captain Kieran Underwood let his guard down he realized the damage that had been done serving as a soldier.
My therapy was doing the infantry thing, being cold, hungry, tired, and alone, being the thing that goes bump in the night. That was therapy for me.
When that life ended, a new kind of work began, a transformation he shares with so many he will compete against this week.
They're in the same spot. They just got a different way that they got here.
The Canadians are, of course, hoping to medal here as hosts, but they say they feel like they've already won, getting to be a part of what one of them calls a giant group therapy session with hundreds of strangers. They feel like they already know. Heather.
A very powerful event. Andrew, thanks. Coming up, cracking a decades-old cold case.
It was investigative genetic genealogy that led us to this arrest.
How DNA technology helped police find a suspected killer. Toronto police say genetic genealogy helped lead to an arrest in the 1998 murder of a young woman in the city.
She was a sex trade worker. We've been in touch with a number of people from the Sex Trade Alliance that have really been instrumental in keeping this case at the forefront.
Police say 24-year-old Donna Ogliv was a resident of BC who'd only been in Toronto 5 weeks when she was found strangled in a downtown parking lot. Police say they had a DNA profile from the scene, but only recently were able to match it to 50-year-old Ronald Ackerman. He's now charged with first-degree murder. One person is dead and at least 11 others taken to hospital after a multi-vehicle collision that shut down an Ontario highway north of Toronto.
Visibility is very, very poor right now. Our roadways are obviously covered in snow and whiteout conditions are just all over the place.
The accident happened shortly before 9:30 this morning near the city of Orillia. A snow squall warning was issued for the area. An accident on the water near Halifax has left 2 fishermen dead and 2 others released from hospital after their boat sank last night. The boat is owned by a Nova Scotia seafood company, and it's unclear what caused it to capsize. A distress signal was sent out around 10 p.m. with rescuers finding 3 of the crew members last night. The 4th was located this morning. Still ahead, a golden opportunity for an Indigenous artist. The art of giving hope and pride to athletes at the Invictus Games. Excitement is building in New Orleans, which is hosting the Super Bowl this Sunday. Football fans are converging on the city, with Philadelphia taking on Kansas City.
When it comes down to playing man, they're very physical. So it's going to be our biggest challenge yet, and I haven't even talked about the D-line yet.
The Chiefs, who have only lost 1 championship game with quarterback Patrick Mahomes leading the team. The Chiefs won the Super Bowl against the Eagles in 2022. As athletes gather in Vancouver for the Invictus Games, they'll be surrounded by the work of Levi Nelson. The contemporary Indigenous artist from Lil'wat Nation was part of the team that helped craft the design of this year's event. CTV's chief anchor Omar Sachedina joins us from Vancouver. And Omar, you got to meet the man behind the medals.
Heather, capturing the stunning beauty of this province and telling the story of his people were 2 main goals for Indigenous artist Levi Nelson, who designed the medals for these games, which are taking place on 4 First Nations. Earlier, he spoke to me about what this moment, seeing his design go from conception to realization, meant for him.
That was very moving, opening the box for the first time. What I was most proud of is that Coast Salish design is going to be spread throughout the world, around the necks and over the hearts of champions who are competing in these games. And that to me is very special. It makes me think that it's so much bigger than I am. You know, the snow-capped mountains, millions of trees, the sky. It's just, this planet is a miracle.
And his work with the Games is continuing until 2027. He's been commissioned by the British government to create a painting referencing the handover of the Games from Vancouver Whistler to Birmingham, England in 2027. And later on tonight, we'll bring you more of my conversation with Levi, including how his own journey of healing mirrors those of the athletes competing here. Heather?
All right, Omar, thank you. And as Omar mentioned, a reminder on the eve of the Invictus Games, CTV National News will be live with Omar Sajidina from Vancouver, where the games will be held. After the break, drawing pride from the skies. Meet the pilot navigating trade turbulence with a patriotic flight plan. Donald Trump's threat of tariffs, along with his talk of Canada becoming a 51st state, has sparked a wide range of reactions among Canadians. For one man in London, Ontario, it prompted a high-flying form of national pride. CTV's Brian Bicknell caught up with the patriotic pilot.
Most people look up at the winter skies and see gray, but Mike Jones sees the maple leaf.
I thought, well, maple leaf is a fairly simple thing to draw out. It's all just points and straight lines.
The semi-retired pilot and flight instructor wanted to express his Canadian pride after Donald Trump's tariff threats and suggestions that he would annex Canada.
And some of the things he said about Canada kind of got me riled up a little bit, and it was just, I thought, a polite way of going up and showing my patriotism. So it started out with just an outline of the maple leaf that I downloaded off the internet.
He took an outline of a maple leaf, placed it over a map of southwestern Ontario, and a new flight path was born.
Move it over to my iPad, and then the iPad gave me all the coordinates and a flight plan, and I was able to upload it into the avionics in the airplane here.
On Wednesday afternoon, Jones took off from London in his Globe G115 fixed-wing aircraft. Some 240 nautical miles, and 2 hours later, radar tracked this near-perfect maple leaf flight path over the region.
Well, it's not as perfect as it looks. Every turn, I'm trying to judge how tight to turn and stuff, but I made it big enough so that my mistakes don't show that badly.
He didn't tell anyone what he was up to, but little did he know, while he was in the air, flight enthusiasts around the world were watching him on the internet. This Facebook page dedicated to aviation posted the maple leaf flight path. One day later, it had 18,000 likes and 11,000 comments. Emmanuel wrote, "Go guys go, Aussies have your backs." Julie said, "This American appreciates our Canadian neighbors." And Eric commented, "This American thinks that's pretty darn cool."
When you're up flying, you kind of forget about everything else. You're concentrating so much when you're flying. I was happy to finish it, and I thought I was just doing it for myself, but I guess there were people watching as I did it.
Brian Bicknell, CTV News.
All right, now that is a very unique way of showcasing Canadian pride. And that is our newscast for this Friday. Thank you for watching. I hope you can join us tonight for CTV National News at 11 for ongoing coverage of Canada's top stories anytime. Tune in to CTV News Channel. I'm Heather Butts. Your local CTV News starts right now.